Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, we could really use your help. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, recently named the Two Opinionated podcast one of its top 100 podcasts. This is a monumental feat for this program. You know, we're a father and son team out of a small town in West Virginia, have been doing this for about 5 years. There's 15 million podcasts out there. About 40,000 of those get to the point that they're listed on IMDb. Out of those 40,000 out of the 15 million, we're ranked number 82. Something that we're just immensely proud of. We're so thankful for our listeners, our watchers, our fans. Thank you so much. If you would like to help us out, and we're asking for it, please. It's easy. It's really easy. It's free. If you go to IMDb, that's IMDb.com, look up Two Opinionated Podcast, and just take a look at the page. That's all you have to do. I mean, you're welcome to look at the cast, look at the episodes so you can kind of see who's been on the program. Do whatever you want. But even just bringing up the page, IMDb.com, Two Opinionated Podcast, bring up the page, look at it. That helps us so much. So please, if you can do anything, we would really appreciate that. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Love to have your subscription there. It's also free. And you can also check out our website, meistercon.com, where you'll find almost 700 episodes, audio and video, available on there. There's also a terrific blog from Brett, and it'll let you know anything that we have going on in studio, if we're covering a convention, if we're going on location, anything that we have going on will be on the website, meistercon.com. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you so much. I can't express enough how appreciative we are of all of you. We never expected to do as well as we have, and that's all because of you. Thank you so much. Enjoy that interview. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Two Opinionated. So excited today. I've got writer, actor, producer John Barbour with me. So welcome, John.
Oh my gosh, what, Michael, thank you so much. I just love the title of your podcast, Too Opinionated. And I love that wall behind you. It looks like you're standing in front of hell and you're their spokesperson.
I'm going to use that. That's the best description I've heard.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
I was telling you off camera, we chose, my son and I chose Too Opinionated because we thought, because of the generation gap, we would have differing opinions about stuff. But what turned out to happen was we basically have the same opinion. We're just very opinionated about that opinion.
Well, I'm anxious to hear about some of them. I seldom have opinions, believe it or not, and I never, ever give advice, ever.
Probably safer that way.
Yes, it certainly is.
Less likely to aggravate somebody that way.
And I must say, I love the accent.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I always knew I had an accent. I didn't realize it was as thick as it was until I started talking to people on the West Coast and out of country. And they were like, where are you from?
Well, you know, the first time I heard an accent that was close to that, when I came down from Canada, I was born in the Salvation Army Charity Ward to two parents who didn't even want me. I came from a very dysfunctional family before it was popular. And my father fought so severely with my mother, he thought he'd be safer if he grabbed a gun and went over to Germany and fought the Germans. So in 1939, he joined the Canadian Army, went over there, lost the stomach, won the Order of the British Empire, and never came home. And my mother started introducing uncles into my life whom I never met. They came in bunches like grapes. They came to beat her and booze with her. and a
Awful.
bed with her. So I was out on the street when I was like 6 years of age. And I spent most of my time as a Canadian, as you would imagine, on a hockey rink or at a theater. And for a nickel, I could see 2 American movies. And I love Frank Capra. And I fell in love. I fell in love with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart. And I thought, I want to be in that country. So I was an inveterate gambler, because you mentioned before we went on the air that you were never a gambler. From the age of 12 to 13, from 13 to 17, I was an inveterate gambler. And I lost everything that I could beg, borrow, or steal, and I stole a lot. And I spent a lot of time in jail. And the library was right across from the jail. So one day I said, I was the first, Michael, to lose all the money and the last to ever leave. And I said to myself, I'm not here to make money. I'm here to make friends. But I don't want to make friends with these kind of people. These kind of people look like the people you have on your wall back there. So I got 2 books. They were called Scarny on Cards and Scarny on Dice. And I memorized them. And in about 3 months, I won $700. See this here?
Yeah.
This is my autobiography. It's called Your Mother's Not a Virgin.
That's a big sized book too.
Yes, it is. It's and the subtitle is The Bumpy Life and Times of the Canadian Dropout Who Changed the Face of America and Television, which I did. You might remember Real People.
Oh, yeah. I grew up on Real People.
Well, I created that show. I was the producer, creator, and principal writer on that show. So that was that. But when I came down here, I actually came down to be a gambler.
Really?
Yes. And I was I got on the train with this blue suit. When I got on the train, I didn't have this hat. This is the old Flamingo Hotel, the Bugsy Siegel Hotel.
Yep.
And I put on this hat because when I was on the train here illegally, well, I went to Niagara Falls. I just walked across the falls and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I've seen the Canadian side of the falls and I want to see the American side of the falls. And they said, okay, how long will you be here? And I said, a day or 2. So I just went to the train station and got on a train to come to Las Vegas, the mecca of gambling. But there was an accident in front of the train that stopped the train. Now, this is a roundabout way of getting to your accent. Okay, but it will get there. So in northern Nevada, the train stopped. Yep. And I thought the Mounties had called the railroad and said, hey, you stop that train. We got to get Johnny Barbour back here and put him in the can. So I jumped off the train, and the only place I could get to was a bus to Lake Tahoe. I go to Lake Tahoe. That's when I buy that hat because I'm only 17 in that picture. And I'd want them to think that I have some cattle, okay? So I go in the Cal Neva Lodge. And for me, Michael, it was like going into an MGM set. And I was looking for Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, and everything looked so beautiful. So I went to the end of the table and I started to gamble. This was going to be my life. And I was doing okay. And people started looking at me. And I thought, oh my God, they know I'm 17. They're going to call the law. Then the people at the bar started looking at me. And then, I got terrified. But then everybody stopped and I knew they weren't looking at me. I'm not that attractive, okay? So I turned around and guess who's walking in through the front glass doors?
Who?
Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, arm in arm with Sam Giancana, the head mafioso of Chicago, and Sinatra has his overcoat draped over him like an Italian Superman. There were 3 Italian Praetorian guards with him. Everybody stops. Now, Michael, a week before, I saw him in a movie called As the Clouds Roll By.
Yeah.
It's a Jerome Kern story. At the end of the film, you might remember, if you saw it, Frank Sinatra standing up there singing Old Man River.
That's right.
Anybody. He walks by us. We're all just staring at him. 25 years, I became his private writer.
How did that happen? How did you get from that point to being his writer?
Okay, so I would like to get to that. I want to get to your accent. The second greatest writer in America is, of course, Mark Twain. And Mark Twain said the 2 greatest days in your life are the day you're born and the day you discover why. And the day I discovered why was when I saw Jack Parr.
Yeah.
You know, your son
Jack Parr was he was the Tonight Show before John. Yeah.
Yeah. And after Steve Allen, who was terrific. But nobody ever came as close to be as wonderful as Jack Parr. Now, I didn't know anybody could earn a living just talking to somebody. I thought they threw beer cans at one another, punched one another. He was so intelligent and so charming, but he opened his show doing a comedy monologue. And so that's when I discovered what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the next Jack Parr. So I never even knew that I could write a joke. And so I got all of the comedy albums and I listened to them all, Lenny Bruce, Shelley Berman, Mort Saul, Bob Newhart, but they all had a distinct style. Right. I have style. Even Henny Youngman. You remember Henny Youngman?
I remember Henny Youngman, yeah.
Yeah. What was his opening line, remember?
No, you have to remind me of that.
Okay. Take my wife, please.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now, not having that, the only thing I had was that I was from Canada. And so what I decided to do was to sit down and write the difference between Canada and the United States. And it was a time with all these Black Power things going on, early in the 50s and the 60s. And my very opening line that I wrote was, "Hi, my name's John Barbour, and I'm down here through the courtesy of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Canadian People." And in 5 minutes, I wrote the greatest, funniest act. And then I was the opening act for the guy that sounded just like you. His name was Jim Neighbors.
Oh, of course, Jim Neighbors.
And it was at the Horn in Los Angeles. And Jim would come out there and tell these great stories in your accent. And then he would say, "Do you mind if I sing?" I don't imitate you as well as you do.
I wish I could sing like Jim Neighbors.
Well, the thing is, he would say, "Do you mind if I sing this little ditty that I learned up in the hills?" And so everybody would cheer. And then he would sing Nuss and Dorman like Pavarotti. He had this great, unbelievable voice. So in any event, what happened when I got to I was making a living, but I had no soul. And I had no purpose for living. You can only gamble 2 hours a day. I'd make a couple of $100. I had no life. There was only one movie theater in town, and I would go to all the great shows. Yeah. I saw Lily St. Cyr and Joey Lewis, great comedian. I saw Edith Piaf, the French girl singer, and Noel Coward, the greatest performers in the world. And I thought, you know what? I want my life to have some value. I cashed in my chips and I went to Hollywood, and that's where it all started.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. So a couple little comments before we move on. You did some writing for Gomer Pyle. So yes, I'm assuming that came from, that time with Jim. And if I remember right, Real People was, I'm thinking, was it on maybe the same night as That's Incredible? And it was kind of like a combo deal, like you had them back to back on the same night?
Well, I guess, what would you like? Would you like to hear a cute story of my first deportation?
Yeah.
And
Let's hear it.
yeah, I was deported twice. I was unemployed. I was deported when I was 17, when I was 20. And you know why I was deported?
Why?
I was too opinionated.
Well, they haven't found me yet.
Yeah. And then I got my citizenship papers in 1977, given to me by Senator John Tunney. But in any event, when I got to Los Angeles, I got into a boarding house at La Brea in Hollywood, and there were only 8 males there. They were the 8 tenants. One was a silent movie star named James Kirkwood. And there was a young man who was about 28 years of age. Now, you might not remember this. Your son would never remember it. But it was so alien to me. It was the era of total blacklisting in this country.
Yeah.
It was the era of McCarthyism. I mean, they had totally destroyed your Constitution and Bill of Rights, looking for commies under every page.
Right.
And at the dinner table, it was only talk of politics. So I was excluded from that conversation because I knew little. Well, this 28-year-old mechanic identified himself as a young Republican, a proud young Republican. So, not knowing anything, I said, "Oh my God, you must be the only one in the country, because every Republican I know of is 70. So anyway, he didn't like that. And in his lapel, he had a button that said, "Better red than dead." Did you ever hear of that?
I remember those times, but it was after the fact. That a lot of that stuff happened before I was born, but I was close enough to it that I remember, hearing about those times.
So I said, "Hey, hold it. Why don't you put a rose there? Or why don't you put a tulip there? Because listen, if you're alive, you can be any color. And if you don't like the color of the world, you can change the color.
Sure.
Otherwise, if you're dead, you're just feeding the worms." So everybody applauds at the table. Now, get this. He is only 28. He didn't even know who Roosevelt was, okay?
Yeah.
But he hated him with a passion. And he said, Roosevelt was crippled by God. And God really wanted to blind him because he was a commie. And the reason he didn't blind him is he wanted him to wake up in the morning and look at that ugly wife of his, Eleanor. Now,
terrible.
That is more than terrible, right? So now I say to him, "Listen, I know very, very little about American politics. All I know from what I heard in the news in Canada, that the Depression in the United States in the 30s was caused by a Republican whose name was Hoover." Now, I said, I'm here and I'm trying to get in show business as an actor, so I certainly don't know much, and I'm not opinionated. And I said, but as I go around, I said, I see Roosevelt Park, Roosevelt Golf Course, Roosevelt Highway, Roosevelt High School. And I say, the only thing in this country named after Hoover is a vacuum cleaner. Well, my God, he cusses me. He jumps up, goes upstairs, and guess what? I have such good instincts as a street kid. I know he's calling the law. So I run upstairs to jump out the window, which I did a lot to get away from the law in Canada. And there are half a dozen cop cars down below. "Mr. Barbour, don't jump, don't jump." So I go back inside. 2 guys in blue suits come in. They're very polite, and they say, "Mr. Barbour, could we see your visa, please?" And I said, "Well, I don't have one." They said, "Well, how did you get into this country?" I said, "I walked." And they said, they asked me where, and I told them Niagara Falls. And what did you say to the immigration officer? I said, well, I just wanted to see this side of the falls, and I'd be here a day. And he said, well, how many days ago was that? I said, 365 days ago. Well, he laughed. So he said, well, you're coming with us. So they take me down to FBI headquarters. They spend an hour drilling me, taking my fingerprints, and then they realize I'm no threat to the American government, 17 years of age. I'm only a threat to stores in Canada if they return me. So they're going to turn me over to the Immigration and Naturalization Service, but they will not deport me as a single because it costs them money.
Right.
They wait till they get about 24 of what they call the Canadian geese, make them fly backwards to Canada, okay? I'm on the 3rd floor, and there are about 35 cots, all occupied by Hispanics and mostly Chicanos. And I do not want to stay there. I am terrified to stay there. And I begged the officers, how can I get out of here in some way? And they say, well, if you can get $19 for a bus ticket to Toronto, we will give you a voluntary departure. Will never be on your record, okay? Now, I had deleted my mother because I hated her so much. You know, a lot of people say, Jesus, John, how did you ever end up with such a fantastic, successful life with having the worst parents as an example?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I had the best. And they said, well, how could you have the best? They were just boozers and bashers and fornicators. I said, because when I saw them, I said, these are 2 human beings I am never going to be like. So I learned that when I was 6 years of age. So I was forced to collect my mother. And I didn't want to talk to her, and I didn't think she'd take the call, but she took the call for one reason, Michael. She wanted to tell me what a bastard I was, just like her husband and my father, and I deserved to be in prison the rest of my entire bloody life. And she cursed and cursed and slammed the phone down. So I decided, you know, I'll find a way out of here. And where I was at Terminal Island made Mar-a-Lago look like a bungalow. It was in San Diego. It was massive. There were no guns. The guards had no guns. Yeah. So I left. It was 50 yards to the bus stop, and on my right, it was like 25 yards to boats, and I was a good swimmer, being a good athlete. So I cased the place for a couple of months and found out Wednesday's their busiest day. And I could go down Jose, who was on the next cot with me, was a guy in charge of once a week gathering all the dirty laundry and stuff, the pillows, etc., putting it in this big cart and dumping it down a chute. And so I couldn't speak much Spanish, but I pantomimed a little bit. They really liked me. Thank goodness for that. So on this Wednesday, he arranged for me to get to the bottom of this little cart and put all the stuff on top of me. We get out to where the chute is on the 3rd floor. He has one of his buddies pretend to faint. So the guards were distracted. He opens the chute and he dumps me down. Now here's this agnostic praying on the way down.
I mean, it sounds like a movie.
Well, later, wait till you hear the end of it. I mean, I have a million stories like this, but because there are others I know you want to get to, but this is really adorable. So I hit this pile of dirty clothes and I jump up and I have only this one outfit on. I run to the west door. It's locked. Oh my God. I run to the east door. It's locked. And I go back and forth, Michael, till I'm exhausted. I almost start crying. I sit down on the dirty clothes and I fall asleep. And soon I'm awakened by somebody shaking me. And it's this big burly guard. And he said, hey, look at what we got here, a live body and all these dirty clothes. Who are you? And I said, John Barbour, sir. He said, well, what are you doing down here in all these dirty clothes? And I said, what do you think? I'm trying to escape. So He started to laugh. He said, well, come on upstairs and let's see what we can do with you. They interviewed me for an hour to make sure I didn't have any co-conspirators. That's all they were interested in, okay? So we go back upstairs. Every single one of these Latinos is standing and staring, wondering if one of them is going to be nailed because I blabbed. But when I put my thumbs up, they put their thumbs up. So they knew that I didn't say anything. And the cops led me to my cot, told me to just sit down and just stay there, that I was going to be deported as soon as we got some more Canadians. So I said to him, sir, pardon me, but it is Wednesday. Why is everything locked up? He started to laugh, and so did his buddies. And they said, I told you how Canadians were so dumb. It's July 4th. It's America's birthday. So everybody starts to howl. From that day on, the Mexicans called me Julio Cuatro. But get this, I'm 17, and 30 years to the day later, I get this great letter. And I am hosting the show that I created that changed the face of American television. And I get this letter that says, Mr. Barbour, you have to tell me you are the guy. I am telling my children, I'm telling my neighbors, I'm telling my grandparents, I'm telling everybody, you are the guy that I dug out of those dirty clothes 30 years ago. I would never forget that voice or face. Please, please help me. So I sent him back an 8x10 glossy, as you get in show business, of Sarah Purcell putting her arms around me. Now I got $1,000 suit, okay? And I say to him, I've been looking for you for years because I wanted to thank you, because if I never had found you, I'd either be in the Merchant Navy or in jail. Instead, here I am holding hands with Sarah Purcell and making $20,000 a week.
Amazing. That's a great story.
Well, I must tell you, all of this stuff happened by, listen, I have had the most amazing and successful life, Michael, and not one bit of it was ever planned except to try to become the next Jack Paar. And I got very close to that. So now you must have dozens of questions you want to ask about Sinatra or anything else like that. I could tell you how I became friends with them, which is a wonderful story, or how I met Jim Garrison.
Well, yeah, so I'd like to know about both. And also, one of my favorite comedians of all time is Tim Conway. So I'd love to hear that story as well.
Oh, well, I have a poster in front of you. You can't see it now. It is 12 feet high and 4 feet wide. And there I am with Tim Conway. And I co-starred with him in the CSI. But I can tell you one cute story about Tim. Do you remember the guy that he was partners with on the Carol Burnett show?
Harvey Korman, right?
Yes, they were inseparable. They were like Abbott and Costello. Anyway, here's what he did. It was about 12 or 14 years ago. Harvey got really, really sick. Let's say it was 12. Let's say it was like 2008 when the recession was. Harvey got really, really sick. And he's in the hospital. And Tim would go there every day, sometimes to hold his hand, to stroke his head. I mean, it was really, really touching. And then it looked like Harvey was going to recover, which he did for a little while. The doctors, wouldn't let Tim stay too long. And then they said to him, Tim, come back tomorrow because I think he might be fully recovered. So Tim rushes out and he has a 2009-year-old calendar made. And when he comes back and Harvey is revived, Tim says to him, Tim, do you know how long you've been unconscious? It shows the 2009 calendar. So,
that's hilarious.
Oh my God. I love show business, even though it's really, really tough. So go ahead. I I was leading to the thing about your accent. But so, as a matter of fact, when Jim Nabors got his first job on television, he called me aside. He was a huge fan. He said, John, I must tell you, I really like what you do. Those topical jokes, they're very edgy and they're very funny. But I got to tell you, I ain't been in this town too long, but I just learned something about this town. It is better in this town to be friendly than to be talented. Because if you're talented, they ain't going to like you. I mean,
right.
He is absolutely right, for God's sake. But anyway, we were friends even long after he made it public that he came out of the closet. But what a singer, what a voice.
Yeah, his voice. It like the first time you ever hear him sing, it's shocking. You don't expect to hear that voice coming out of him.
That's right. Now, it is even more shocking, though, in the beginning when he sounded like you in the first nightclub he worked in and then opened it. He got a standing ovation every single night. And it's like, it's a gift from the gods to be able to sing like that. And very few people have that. So now you may have some questions.
I've got some questions.
Okay, because listen, when I get going, I can go for hours and hours because look at the book is 752 pages.
Yeah, it's a thick book.
I had to take out 300 pages. I had so many more stories to tell.
Well, you got to write a sequel.
Well, my son told me to publish. My son is the executive producer, co-executive producer of a show called Criminal Minds, and one of the head writers. And he keeps saying, geez, Dad, you must make a sequel to your book. And I said, listen, the first one didn't become a bestseller. And the reason for it, even though I will tell you, I was the first one in America to review movies on the news.
Yeah.
And we used to have a thing called the Fairness Doctrine. I was the first one in America as a film critic to have a producer challenge a review and demand equal time. And it went through the courts, and the Supreme Court finally ruled on the film, denying the guy equal time. You want to hear what that movie was?
Yeah, what's the movie?
Soylent Green.
Really?
Do you remember the movie?
Oh, yeah, of course. Charlton Heston.
Yeah, okay. Tell your audience what the theme of the movie was.
I mean, basically it's the government's feeding the people.
Yes, because and the year, the year that it takes place?
Now I've forgotten the year.
2022.
Okay.
And America has run out of food, but they haven't run out of corpses. So they develop a way to turn the corpses into crackers, squares that are called Soylent Green. And I had some joke about so we could get 3 squares a day, right? So anyway, I'm reviewing the film, and I'm absolutely trashing the film, really. And I'm getting screams in a newsroom, and you're not supposed to get laughs in a newsroom. And then I felt guilty about being cruel. I wasn't cruel, I was honest, and I said to the audience, you know what? Hundreds of great talents go into making a movie, and they don't go into making a movie that's bad. Right. It just sometimes doesn't turn out right. And this movie did not turn out right, but maybe I can say something nice about it. So the news people chuckle, and I could say, the sets are beautiful. And then I feel guilty because I'm lying. So then I add, the sets would have been more beautiful if they'd placed them in front of Charlton Heston. So they applauded and screamed. Anyway, the producer from Fox calls Bob Howard, the general manager of the station, and said, you fire John Barbour now, or we're not taking any ads. Fox is not taking any ads. Bob Howard says, if I fire Johnny, my wife's going to fire me. She adores that guy. He's so funny and so cute. I was cute then. But so you're denied. And then he said, well, give us under the fairness doctrine equal time. He says, no, you're not getting it. Take it to the courts. So he went to the courts in LA, denied. He spent 2 years going to the Supreme Court in California, denied, spent another 3 years taking it to the United States Supreme Court and denied. And you know what the Supreme Court justice said to him?
What?
We are denying you equal time to rebut Mr. Barbour's reviews because John Barbour's reviews are of absolutely no public importance. So I got trashed. I got trashed.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so please ask me a specific question.
Well, let's go back to Frank.
Okay.
How did that come about? Because he comes in, you kind of met him there, but how did you end up being his personal writer for such a long period of time?
It resulted from my being a film critic. And everybody knew, of course, that Frank Sinatra absolutely hated Rex Reed. Do you remember Rex Reed?
I don't remember Rex Reed.
Rex Reed was the most popular critic on network television.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
The guy who came flaming out of the closet, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and Sinatra absolutely hated it. Anyway, I was reviewing The Great Gatsby. Do you remember the movie The Great Gatsby?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, it was, Paramount was headed by that time by a guy named Phyllis Diller. His actual name was Barry Diller, but like Rex Reed, he was really a Phyllis Diller, okay?
Gotcha.
You get the point. Anyway, the movie was the second time they made The Great Gatsby. The first time was with Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake, and they made it wrong, even though I was a huge fan of Alan Ladd. The second one was worse, but it was in Technicolor, and it was fantastic. And Robert Redford looked fantastic. Everybody looked fantastic in color. But the problem with the movie is America was having a tough time. And it opens with a 15-minute sequence of this billionaire, Robert Redford, this gorgeous guy in $5,000 suits, throwing this magnificent party where everybody is fornicating and drinking and doing everything. So for 15 minutes, there's nobody that you like.
Right.
And that was a mistake because F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote the brilliant novel, wrote it in a way that was still captivating. And they made the mistake of following the novel. You don't know in the novel how he got to be a billionaire, but the writing is so capturing to you. You stay with the book until the end, until you find out that Robert Redford was as poor as I was, and he made it on his own during the Depression of the 30s.
Right.
But that's the mistake. Now, what Phyllis Barry Diller does, he announces that at that time, it only cost $3 to get into a movie. And at that time, everybody in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, everyone was having these great Gatsby parties. It was on the cover of Time magazine, was on the cover of Newsweek, and Barry Diller had a news conference and told everyone they must buy Paramount stock because they will make 5 times the money they have now, because Paramount has just bought one of the most successful clothiers in New York City to put out Great Gatsby clothing.
Okay.
I mean, he was so high on it, okay? So I go to see the film, and I bomb it. And then at the end, I explained why, about the story being backwards. And I said, the only way that Barry Diller is going to get $6 for this movie if he charges $3 to get in and $3 to get out. That literally destroyed the film. I mean, Time and Newsweek, everybody picked up the joke. Now, somebody who picked up the joke was a guy named George Slaughter. George Slaughter was the co-executive producer of Laugh-In, and they were doing a revival of Laugh-In.
Okay.
So he called me. Now, at the time, I'm the Critic-At-Large at channel NBC, and he calls me and he said, would you come on the revival of Laugh-In as our Critic-At-Large and become one of the writers? And I said, well, I'd be thrilled to do that. At the time, he had 18 writers. One of them was David Letterman's girlfriend. And the other writer was a guy named Digby Wolf, an English drunk and wit who actually created Laugh-In. Inside scoop for you. But in any event, I go there and in Laugh-In, I don't know if you ever saw it. But
oh, yeah, I remember Laugh-In.
Okay, there was never an audience. It's all canned laugh.
Right.
Now, this is the second time I see Sinatra. I'm in my 40s, so I go to the top of the audience. It's all empty. And in comes Sinatra again with 4 or 5 of his Praetorian Guard. And here's George Slaughter and Digby Wolf, and they have all these pages of jokes. George Slaughter has all these pages of jokes, and Digby has mine. Sinatra can be very, very tough, as you well know. So he looks at the first page. He said, oh, who wrote this shit? Who wrote this shit? And he throws it on the ground. Oh, my God. And then he's out of jokes. And then he looks at George Slaughter. He says, is that it? And I'm going to host this show. So Digby said, well, take a look at this. So he looks at this stuff, and I have a bunch of jokes about New Jersey, which is where Sinatra is from.
Right.
How they're going to prisons in New Jersey to try to find candidates to run for governor. Oh, my God. He howled. He howled. So he says, who wrote this? Digby points at me. He looks up there like that, and he says, hey, kid, I'm in my 40s. So I stumble down the stairs, and I come over, and he looks at me, and he said, hold it a second. Are you that critic? And he said it like he hated critic, who works with Tom Snyder. Do you remember Tom Snyder?
I remember Tom Snyder.
Yeah, he did the Tomorrow Show, but he used to anchor the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And that's where I did all my reviews, right next to Tom Snyder. And he said, hold it. Are you the guy that does these reviews with Tom Snyder? And I said, yes, sir. I'm the one that's known as the heterosexual Rex Reed. Well, he screamed. And then Digby Wolf said, Mr. Sinatra, wait till you see this. Then he hands him my first comedy album. And it's called It's Tough to Be White. And the liner notes are by Dick Gregory. And it was bombed by the LA Times. And I said, oh, Mr. Sinatra, please, Digby handed you that. But I hope you don't look at it or listen to it, because the LA Times bombed it. He said, that's all the more reason for me to want to listen to this, okay? So he took it, and I thought I would never hear from him again. The very next day, Michael, it's in my book, and I could wish I could show you if I could turn the camera. The only letter I have on my wall from Frank Sinatra saying, you are now mine, and we are going to definitely do something together. And we did get to do a lot of things together. And one of the really wonderful stories about that, I wrote, there's a book called His Way by Kitty Kelly. And there are a number of letters in the editor, supposedly from Frank to a lot of important people. Those were the letters I wrote.
Amazing.
And if I wrote a joke, or if I wrote a letter, he sent me 10 brand new $100 bills. And I said, listen, I don't want money. Do you know what an honor it is for me to be associated with you? And he said, if you don't take the money, take a walk, because I pay for the best, and I will pay for the best. And you're the best joke writer and letter writer I have ever run across. And I swear to God, we're going to do something other than that. Anyway, he does The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
That's okay. If you Google my site, www.johnbarbersworld.com, you'll see him introducing me as his first guest on The Tonight Show. And I do a stand-up.
Amazing.
And I'm a hit. I'm going to expand on that story a little bit. Do we have 5 or 10 minutes?
Of course.
Okay, so anyway, after the show, I get a call from Jim Garrison, the district attorney of New Orleans. Now, I had created and built the first successful morning show on ABC in Los Angeles called the AM Show.
Right.
And that's the first time I tried to book Mr. Garrison on the show after I read his book about the trial called Heritage of Stone. And it turned out that the government and the media tell us that he lost a conspiracy case, which he did. But if you read the book, he found out he won the perjury case against Clay Shaw, which was his most important case. Also, you learn that he had to take Time Life magazine to the Supreme Court to get the Zapruder film. And then there was a forensic pathologist named Fink, who's called to the defense of Clay Shaw. And on cross-examination, he said there was no autopsy because this General Curtis LeMay stopped the autopsy. So I read the book. I called him in New Orleans. I tried to get him on the show, and after a half an hour, convinced him, even though he said you'll never get away with it. Then after I booked him, we talked a lot about Shakespeare, happened to be his favorite writer because in the book, all the titles were Shakespearean, and I was fired immediately. Okay, so I lost that show. Now, 11 years later, I have Real People.
Right.
The most, 22,000 pieces of mail a week. And now in the third year, I'm making $30,000 a week. Now that's a fortune. But on page 13, the House Select Committee concludes 4 shots have been fired in Dealey Plaza because they find the dictabelt machine of a motorcycle officer named H.B. McLean that's left open driving through Dealey Plaza, and more than 4 shots are recorded. So they have to conclude it's a conspiracy. They send it to the Justice Department, telling them, please, this is an open cold case, investigate. And that was back in the late 70s, and it's been a locked up cold case ever since. And not one person or 2 people in the assassination community, from Oliver Stone to Dr. Cyril Wecht, all of whom I admire, have the balls to 2 weeks from now storm the Justice Department and demand that they open this solved cold case up. Everything, Michael, that went wrong with this country and the world happened on November 22nd, 1963. So anyway, when Mr. Garrison calls me, he said, my God, I didn't know you were that funny. Can I borrow some of the jokes? And I said, sure. And one of the comments he liked, I said, Watergate is something that may have put America on the brink of democracy. Got a huge hand. And anyway, he took some of the jokes. Then after he hung up, Frank Sinatra called me. Now, I'm going to tell you very shortly and quickly about my appearance on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Between the acts on the Tonight Show, Doc Severinsen's band has to play really loud, because if you go 3 minutes with a large audience, they can't keep quiet. They start talking to one another. But if the band plays loud, they have to shut up and listen. Okay. Right. So after Francis, that's what he liked friends to call him, finishes with his interview, he says, we'll be right back. Now, I know it's me next, but there's no orchestra playing for 3 minutes. And it gets louder and louder with people talking. And I want to run away. I had never been so frightened in my life, because how could I possibly bomb in front of Frank Sinatra, in front of the world? Okay. Oh my God.
Yeah, it'd be terrifying.
It was terrifying. Anyway, I go out there and I'm a hit. I'm an absolute hit. My 5 minutes runs into like 8 or 9 minutes because of the laughs. Now, afterwards, I go out into the hallway because I don't like to be around a lot of people. I'm with my wife, Sarita, just adorable. What a wonderful woman. There would have been no real people without her, by the way. And the band leader comes out and he's got tears in his eyes. And he says, John, I'm so sorry we never played for you. I said, hey, look at it, all worked out well. And he said, I'm just so sorry. He said, because Johnny ordered us not to play for you. And the reason Johnny hated me, the first time I was booked on the show, after I was an enormous hit, not only on Merv Griffin's show, but when Merv Griffin left Westinghouse to go to CBS, they signed me to be the next host.
Yeah.
Of that show, okay? And Johnny booked me on June the 8th, 1968. Do you remember that day?
No.
That's the day they killed Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I said to him, you can't do a show. You can't do a show. He said, we have to entertain America. I said, you can't entertain America, for God's sake. They just killed the next president.
Yeah.
Biggest mistake I ever made in my life was doing that show, because I wished I had just walked down, instead of telling jokes, how much I loved being an American, how I wanted to be here. The only country in the world made up of people from every country in the world. The only country in the world founded on a book of laws, which is a constitution and the Bill of Rights. I mean, that it was like a Jimmy Stewart speech. That's what I wanted to do. Instead, I did jokes and I bombed. And I tried to run off the stage. But Johnny had lost a guest and nobody to talk to, so he made me come over and sit down next to him. And he smelled like my mother.
Oh, no.
He was such a drunk. And we never, ever got along. And he tried to fire me every chance that he had, when he had a chance to get me fired at NBC. And even he could not fire me. So anyway, back to the phone call. Frank Sinatra calls me after Jim Garrison gets on the phone. He says, can you come to my office at Formosa Studios? So I go over there, and you would never know that this guy was in show business. He was dressed as casually as I am. There are no pictures of anything up there except his mother. No plaques or anything. I mean, it was like being at home. My God. But he still gave off this aura. And he said to me, how would you like to come with me for 8 months as my opening act? I will pay you $3,500 a month for 8 months. And you will become famous, as I think you should deserve to be, other than well-known in LA. And I said, Francis, I can't do that. And he said, what do you mean you can't do that? And I said, well, you know, my father left us when I was 8. The pain was unbearable. I am not going to be an absentee father to my son. So I'll continue to make my $350 a week at KNBC, and I will continue to take my son to junior golf tournaments where my son was the Caucasian Tiger Woods at that time. And that will make me happy. Well, he almost started crying. And he reached over and he grabbed me and he said, well, we got to do something together. And I said, you know what you should do? And if this all starts blurting out, I said, you should do an Italian Roots. And he says, what the F is an Italian Roots? And I said, hold it. Don't you remember the series on ABC, Kunta Kinte? It was 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, 1 hour. It was just a total smash. I said, what I would do with you, I said, listen, Bing Crosby died when he was 77 on a golf course in Spain. Do you go into any restaurant anywhere in the world and hear Bing Crosby? And he said, hey, don't talk about my kid. That's who I wanted to be, was Bing. I said, but you were more than an entertainer or a singer. You were a social and political force, because if you and the Rat Pack had not sung for John Kennedy, High Hopes, that man would have never become president of the United States. So you should be taking a bow for that. So he said, I tried to before he wrecked my house. That's another story. But in any event, he said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, I will take a camera down to your house in Palm Springs every weekend for a couple of hours, and I will interview you about everything your entire life. And I will find people who loved you. I will find people who hated you. I will find people who got married to you. People got divorced. And I said, I may even ask you about the first time I saw you with when you were with Sam Giancana. And you should have seen him. I mean, he leans over like this. He says, kid, you got some balls. And I said, well, and the reason he was upset is he was trying to convince the gaming board in Nevada at the time that he knew none of these people, so he could keep his license at the Sand Hotel. You may have read that story about how this Jew Cohen knocked out all his teeth. I don't want to get into that, but in any event, and I said, you would never hear my voice. You would be, I would edit it. That would be 5 one-hour shows. You would be the only entertainer in history who would have a visual autobiography Monday through Friday, every night for an hour. The world would stop just to listen to you telling the world about your magnificent life. He said, my God, could you write that up? And I said, yes. He said, I mean now, right away. And I said, well, give me a couple of days. And he said, bring it into Dorothy. That was his great secretary. I had it in there the next day. Well, shortly thereafter, I get fired from being a critic. And I created the Real People show while I was a critic, because I used to read the stories coming over the wire services, not for public consumption. The first story I saved was The Stripper for God. I thought, oh my God, what a story. So I found 20 of those, put them together, and I was trying to figure a way of selling. Then I'm fired. I'm totally fired. So I lose the job because I asked for a $50 raise and they don't give it to me. And I go home and I'm satisfied. And then I get home and my wife is there with a fellow named Chris Hayward. You know what? I think I'm going a little long because I don't want to keep you too long, And I want to hear some questions for you, but I have 100 stories in my head.
You've got some great stories.
And this was leading to what happened. If I got maybe 5 or 8 minutes just to tell you how I accidentally got Real People on the air, and then we can call it quits.
Yeah.
And I can come back another time.
Of course, you're welcome back anytime. We'll do multiple parts.
Oh, that's great, because then I can finish the book on your show. Okay. So in any event, I get home, and there's Chris Hayward, was the guy who saved Barney Miller from being canceled after 13 weeks. You remember Barney Miller?
I love Barney Miller.
Yeah, well, Chris Hayward was my son's godfather. So he said, and Danny Arnold was the co-creator of Barney Miller. So he says, Danny Arnold has a contract at ABC to create more shows. And Danny can't create anything, but he has this contract. Why don't Sarita and I go in there and see if we can do something about your Real People show? So I go in there, they go in there, and 10 minutes later, I had this contract for 13 weeks at $1,000 a week to create my reality show. And I'm going to call it, I forget what I was going to call it at the time. National Graffiti, a cross between the National Enquirer and American Graffiti.
Yeah.
Great movie from Universal, because a lot of stories came out of the Enquirer. So right after that, he sets up an appointment with me with Maury Gelman at Daily Variety, and I tell Maury Gelman, this unemployed, formerly deported Canadian is going to change the face of American television with what I call the entertainment of reality. Then Danny sets up a meeting with a guy named Lou Ehrlich, who's a nighttime programming director. He has the 5 scripts I've written, and he says, what is this shit about little people? And I said, they're not little people, they're real people. And he said, I don't understand it. Is anybody going to care about these little people? I said, yeah. He said, who's going to watch this? And I said, well, maybe a lot of people, because my co-host is going to be Richie Pryor. And
yeah,
he says that is never getting on this network. Now, at the time, Richie had just done a special for NBC, and one of the executives at Standard and Practices cut out one of his skits. He ran in the office and punched the guy out, knocked him out, and he was arrested. So when I'm selling Ehrlich, here he is in jail, and the IRS is waiting for him outside because he's not paying his taxes. But he loves the idea of hosting the show with me, because we were the best of friends for years. We were both struggling comics. So in any event, what we do is Ehrlich and Danny assign 2 people who are absolutely horrible on their feet, live, ad-libbing in front of an audience. But the 4 stories I shot were fantastic, just unbelievably fantastic. And so it bombs. And I go up to Ehrlich and Danny Arnold after the audience leaves, and I said, listen, I'm supposed to have total creative control of this show, Danny, as you promised me. And Lou, you think I'm nothing but shit in television. And you say that even local Emmys are shit in television. So why don't the 2 of you, it's me telling these guys, get out of my way and leave me alone. And Danny Arnold says, well, you're on your own. And I say, great. And he says, you're fired. I was fired again. So I took the pieces that I shot. I went to 10 producers who loved the pieces, but they didn't know how anything like that would work. So I gave it up. I'm 46, and I stand in front of my little bungalow, and it became the happiest day of my life, because I realized, Michael, I'm not going to be the next Jack Parr. I am never going to get this show on the air. And it was such a weight off of me. I said, everybody wanted me to write jokes as a writer. I was getting calls all the time. So I'll do that, and I'll continue to caddy for my son. I go inside and I hug my wife, and I'm so at peace. And the phone rings, and it's Digby Wolf again. And he's now at Westinghouse developing shows. And he said, hey, I heard you had bad luck at ABC. Come on over here, and let's see, I have a development deal. Your show sounds great. I loved working with you on Laugh-In. So I take the stuff over, and I had to sit down in a sofa that's between George Slaughter's office and Digby's office. Digby's on the phone. George's office opens up. He comes out and he sees me, and he's this big, great. He picks me out the ground. How great to see you. Oh my God, I miss our working together on Laugh-In. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm here to see Digby. He wants to talk to me about my show. He said, you come in here and talk to me about my show. So I go in there, and he says, I have a contract with NBC to do 4 specials called Country versus Music, a Country versus City, country jokes, city jokes, country music, city. And I said, what a great concept, perfect for you because you have a short attention span. And he said, And he says to me, how would you like to do your show here? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I just got a call from Freddie Silverman. And he said, George, can you do a Real People show? And George says, let me see. So then he says to me, John, do you want to do your show here? And I say, will you call it National Graffiti? He said, no, idiot, I'm going to call it Real People. And I said, but that's so ordinary. He said, hey, I want Freddie Silverman to think he's smart. So we'll call it Real People because he asked. Okay? And George the Slaughter indeed was smart. So I walked out of there with thousands of dollars as a writer, the creator, and it's just unbelievable. And when I get home, I get a call from Francis. And he says, John, it's about 12 weeks now, and I can't get off my mind the thing about the Italian roots. When can we start? And I said, I can't. He said, what do you mean you can't? I said, I just got Real People on the air. He said, well, that's not going to last long, is it? I said, it'll last longer than 60 minutes if I'm still in charge. Well, I was only in charge for 3 years, did more in 3 years for America than 60 Minutes did in 30 years. It got the Missing Children's Act passed. It got the presidential citation for the Navajo Code Talkers. And most of all, it played the most important part in getting that Vietnam Memorial Wall built in Washington, D.C., which thousands of people visited yesterday. So there you go.
Amazing. Yeah, that what an amazing story. John, you'll have to come back. We got so many more stories we got to go through.
Oh my God, I could tell you stories about Lucy and about Desi and about, oh my God, George Burns. I could tell you about the greatest evening ever spent with George Burns and how Lucille Ball got to own her own show. I've got a million of them. And the thing is, in my book, I'm going to mention the book again.
Yeah,
I was the first host of the Gong Show. And
really?
yeah, well, there you go. See, you don't know. Did I send you a copy of the book?
You haven't yet.
Well, you didn't ask for it. Yeah, now you listen. You send me your address. You have my email or get it from Harlan.
Yeah, I'll get it.
I will send you an autographed copy. It's all 5 stars. The reason it's never been reviewed by Time or Newsweek or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, which were all supporters of the Warren Report, is that I have a couple of chapters on Jim Garrison and how he solved the murder of John Kennedy.
Yeah.
And they don't want the world or America to know that. But you don't have to read it from beginning to end. You just look at the chapter that says, the Gong Show. It's 5 pages. It is hilarious and very informative.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it. Yeah, and that's very gracious of you. Thank you very much.
You're kidding. Because I'm sorry that I didn't give you more of a chance to talk, but I don't get much of a chance.
Nobody wants to hear me talk. They're coming on to hear you.
Oh, no. Listen, you and your son wouldn't be this successful in a place like West Virginia if you two guys weren't too cleverly opinionated. Okay.
I appreciate that, sir. Well, so before we wrap up, you do have an event coming up on the 22nd. Do you want to talk about that for just a minute?
I'll tell it very, very quickly. It is a wonderful, wonderful 85 minutes. I have the first 2 definitive documentaries about the murder of John Kennedy and how Garrison solved the case. The first one is free on my site called the Garrison Tapes, www.johnbarbersworld.com. The second one is only $2. And in 100 years from now, it's called The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John Kennedy. And long after every book and film is long forgotten, this would be the only thing historians will be looking at. Now, those two documentaries, Jim Garrison is telling his story.
Right.
In the third documentary, I get to tell my story of the 53 years and the over $500,000 I spent trying to tell Jim's story just to get a scholarship for him at Tulane University, because he has to be remembered more than John Kennedy. And then I tell the parallel story of my trying to be successful in the business that I chose to be in, and how I tried to be a good citizen and a great father and a great husband.
Love
So
it.
it tells two stories. It's a wonderful, wonderful, captivating 85 minutes. And it's called John Barbour's and William Shakespeare's Last Word on the Murder of JFK, and it opens November 22nd at the Town Square 5 Theater in Encino, California. And on the 25th, which is a Saturday, I'm going to be there for all three screenings, 1 o'clock, 3:30, and 7:30.
What a great day.
Yeah, so that in case there's a question and answer, I want to meet and greet the people.
That's amazing. Yeah, that sounds like a terrific evening.
Well,
Yeah, that's good for you. And yeah, I'd love to have you back on so we can kind of really dive into the Kennedy stuff. So yeah, you have to come back.
well, perhaps in the middle of December, we could make it a kind of a Christmas gift.
Love it.
I could tell you some Christmas stories too that are really.
Yeah, yeah, let's do that.
Well,
So couple little things, John, before we wrap up.
yeah.
Go through, where we can find your book, your website again, and if you're on social media.
Well, I am on Facebook, and if you go to Facebook, you will read some of the funniest and the brightest comments you will ever see. You won't find them anyplace else. I hate to say that. And the book you can get on Amazon, 5 stars. And my website is www.johnbarbersworld.com. And you will see, I mean, me on the Tonight Show with Sinatra, when they roasted Red Fox on the Dean Martin show, I was the first one they called to roast Red Fox. You will find all kinds of unbelievable stories, unbelievable. And every one of them perfectly made, funny and informative and entertaining and really smart.
I love it. Well, John, thank you so much. And please, let's do that. Middle of December, let's plan something, get back together.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And my best to your son for helping you too.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I couldn't do it without him. We talked a little about the technology stuff. I mean, he's my tech guy. So without him, this podcast wouldn't happen.
Well, with my first documentary, The Garrison Tapes, my son got out of Stanford, and I couldn't have done that without him because he became my first assistant. So you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you in the middle of December.
Sounds terrific, sir. Yeah, hold on 1 second. John Barbour, I hope you enjoyed that one. The interview went a little long, but I absolutely loved it. He's got the best stories, and just listening to his life, so interesting. So I really hope you enjoyed that. So much more that we didn't get to, but we'll bring John back to talk about it. John is known as the Godfather of Reality TV because of Real People, which I mentioned during the interview, but I'm pretty sure that they showed that back to back with That's Incredible. And that was must watch TV back in the day when I was growing up, and just incredible that was John's baby that was on there. Those around my age, I guarantee, have fond memories of those shows. His work with the around the Kennedy assassination is fascinating and just really, really interesting. His documentaries are kind of looked at as companion pieces to Oliver Stone's JFK. Just really, really interesting theories about the assassination and what may have actually happened. So definitely check those out. He was going to be the next Merv Griffin, and we didn't get to the reason why that never actually happened. So maybe we can discuss that next time he comes on. I love the Gomer Pyle stories about the accent. That was terrific. The Frank Sinatra stuff, amazing. He's Frank Sinatra's personal writer for a long period of time. It's pretty incredible. And then he did stand up, had a show with Tim Conway in Vegas that they went under the stage names of Knuckles and Nash, which I would love to have seen. Such a Tim Conway fan, but just an amazing guy. He's got something like 5 or maybe 8 Emmys. I'm not sure which numbers, right? But it's a lot of Emmys. He's a very talented writer and was a very good critic and very honest, which got him into some hot water at times. But, that's what you want, I think, out of a critic. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. Please, if you're finding us for the first time, we've got hundreds. We're closing in on episode 700, hundreds of interviews. They're all so good. I'd love for you to check that out and support us. There's a couple easy ways you can support us. They're free. If you like to watch, our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything, but really helps us out. We recently were named a top 100 podcast by IMDb. Please go to imdb.com and just look up the Two Opinionated podcast. It's free, but just bringing our page up really does help us out. So please do that if you're able. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again with us week after week. We definitely don't take you for granted. Appreciate you so much. Till next time. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm once again here to ask for your support. It's been a big year for the Two Opinionated podcast. Back in February, we got to live out a dream, moderate for William Shatner here in our hometown. In May, we passed 100,000 downloads on our YouTube channel, and we followed that up in June with 50,000 downloads on the audio side. We recently posted our 600th episode, which is pretty good volume for just a father and son operation. Not too many podcasts can keep that volume up. We've been doing this now for 4.5 years, 600 plus episodes. We recently hit 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, which is a really big deal for us because we've always gotten the views, but have struggled to get people to subscribe. So that 1,000 was a big deal for us. And best of all, we were recently named one of the top podcasts on IMDb, which is the entertainment database. Those that are ahead of us, we came in at number 82. Those that are ahead of us are bigger companies like Disney, mostly Marvel, and Joe Rogan, that type of podcast. So for us, being just a small West Virginia father and son podcast, to be in the top 100 out of 15 million, it's a pretty big deal for us. So thank you for everything you've done for us so far. Got a couple little ways, though, that you can help us, and they're free, and they're really easy. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, please go to YouTube. It's under MeisterCon Pod. Just hit subscribe. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Really helps us a ton. And maybe even more important, if you could go to imdb.com, look up the Two Opinionated podcast, and just look around the page. Just having that traffic on the page really helps us out. So that's a couple easy ways that you can support us, even if you're not listening or watching all of the time. And we want you to listen and watch, because I think that our guest list, I would put up against anybody, any other show, podcast, anybody out there. I think our guest list holds up. So please check us out. You probably will find somebody that you like, or maybe somebody that you didn't know you liked, but kind of discovered them on there. There's tons of that. If you're into music, we have that too. If you like books, we've got authors on there. If you're more into what goes on behind the scenes in the entertainment world, you know, we've got producers, directors, video artists, anything you can think of that happens behind the scenes, we've had them on the show. So definitely check us out. Thank you guys so much. Until next time. Bye, everybody.